Hare Krishna, everyone. Great to be with you again. Today is the third class of 4 of the Light of the Bhagavata. We'll be reading from and discussing verses 25 through 36. And we'll start also with some reflections from last week, the verses 13 to 24. And before that, we'll start with some kirtan. Hare Krishna. Sure. I got it. It's fine.
You got it? Okay. Come into your comfortable seat. Sit tall. Shimmy anything that needs to be shimmied, shaked, released, shed, just to drop in together in this moment for this next hour and a half or so. Begin with our opening prayers. Take a deep breath in, fill up. Exhale, clear out your mouth first. Inhale, fill up.
Pramagana Timirantasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripasubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Great to be with you all again. So let's start with any reflections. We had a lot of nice reflections on WhatsApp, on the verses. There are a few themes, but let's just have some reiteration of any of that so we can kind of feel that flow of the verses, what we heard last week, moving into this week. Anything that stood out. The last section of the verses we read from was just directly descriptions of Krishna and Balaram and their pastimes. Can I have the hard copy?
Yes.
Thank you.
I was thinking about how one of the last things we were talking about was how you said you're talking about leading to serve, and that's what
leadership
leader
means being like the most qualified servant.
Right.
Yeah.
And just like be spiritual and inspire those around you by just being who you are and having that servant mindset, and that people will be purified by your service. And I was thinking about also how, like, the book isn't over here, you have the book, but these verses all about nature. It's like nature, by its nature is spiritual because it has spirit within it, right? Krishna created it, and we're constantly inspired by nature. And like Lord Chaitanya speaks about in the Sri Shastakam of like, be as tolerant as a tree, as humble as a blade of grass. Like he's even comparing, these these qualities of a devotee to nature. And so like how we can be inspired by a sunset, by the mountains, by the ocean, these things all around us all the time. And like we can feel spirit in being in the presence of nature. What if we can then be like that and inspire people and have people feel spirit by being in the presence of us? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And how what an amazing thing to strive to be of service, but also that your service then can invoke spirit in other people.
Yeah, that our practice and service like helps qualify ourselves to become examples and inspiration to others.
Mhm.
And I'll also add to that the more advanced we are, the more we can find in others their own spiritual spark. Like these verses are from the realization of Shukadeva Goswami, great devotee who speaks the Bhagavatam with Prabhupada's commentary. Like somebody who with a very dull mentality may just look at nature and not see these spiritual lessons. Maybe they might find material lessons. Maybe they wouldn't find anything at all. Maybe they'd be annoyed by the rain. It's like as Tracy was commenting, like we don't see really the world the way it is. We see it according to our covering and our lenses.
Right.
This is a major theme. So the devotees see Krishna and they find spiritual lessons. So the more we qualify ourselves, the more people can see us, but also the more we can actually see their own spiritual qualities before they're even aware of them and engage them in Krishna's service, and encourage them, fan that spark, like our gurus are doing with us ourselves. They're seeing that spiritual quality, just like Prabhupada is seeing these incredible lessons in clouds and raindrops and flowers and so forth, like incredibly like potent, universal, human spiritual lessons. That takes empowered vision. So these are the kinds of things that come through spiritual practice.
And your guru's, like his tagline on his website is fan the spark.
Yeah. Yeah. Johnny, any more reflections from the last week of verses? Yes.
Share. I apologize, I did not have a chance to share. It's been a little bit of a wacky week. But I think it was Allison who also commented on the crane. So personal for me, because even when I think about, my life and as I came, as that spark was fanned by Kishori, how it's like, oh, how would my life look if I didn't drink anymore? you know, like how I'm like, this is what I've always done. Like, this is
Right.
what you do when you go out, and you get so like stuck in that conditioning and what's comfortable.
Yeah, the status quo.
And you just, so it's just been, it was really cool that, you know, sometimes you beat yourself up about it, and you've also taught us like not to, you know, beat yourself up so badly about that kind of thing. But the fact that Prabhupada then gives us like even examples from nature, he almost like softens. It's like a softer approach to kind of looking at the way that we've lived our lives, maybe before we remembered him, and then like in reflection of like what it looks like now. So all of those things, like I thankfully didn't really eat meat most of my life, but like even that practice, like I did give up eating fish. And so it's like, but it's what I always did, you know. And it's, so it's really interesting when you talk to people about coming to Krishna consciousness, they're like, how do you go out and not have a glass of wine? Like, how do you not eat that delicious, disgusting piece of bacon? Like, you know, it's just funny how, and I just felt it was just such a sweet, soft approach to talking about how humans can be so stubborn and also so distracted from the real thing.
Yeah, it's one of our greatest strengths and one of our greatest weaknesses is we can adapt ourselves to anything. We can live in absolute misery and survive. And we can also get very attached to that survival and stop thriving. And I appreciate what you're saying, because this text is less finger wagging, even though the actual lessons are very much the same. You know, getting attached to material comfort and situation is a waste of time. That's like a fundamental spiritual lesson. But Prabhupada's not doing it like, you're so silly for doing this. What's wrong with you? It's just like, look at the crane. This is what the crane does. And this is telling us about the situation of this tendency to just kind of get like super comfortable and better the devil I know. Just stay in my status quo, you know, maybe a hole, but it's my hole. So when we see the crane do that, and when we see the lesson imparted about the crane, we don't take it so personally. Then we can kind of reflect, oh, maybe I'm craning my life a little bit. Maybe I'm like sitting in the muck. I don't need to. Yeah. Thank you. Any other reflections before we move to verse 25? Okay. Verse 25. The Lord reciprocated the feelings of the inhabitants of the forest of Vrindavana. When there was rainfall, the Lord took shelter at the feet of the trees or in the caves and enjoyed the taste of different fruits with his eternal associates, the cowherd boys. He played with them, sat with them, and ate fruits with them. Here he is, sitting with the boys and eating. So this is an observation of Krishna actually interacting with his devotees during the rainy season. So Srila Prabhupada describes, in Vrindavan, all the spiritual entities, the cowherd boys, the cow maids, the forest, the trees, the hills, the water, the fruits, the cows, and all others, enjoy life spiritually in association with the Lord, Sri Krishna. They are simultaneously one with and different from the Lord, but ultimately they are one in different varieties. So there's this way in which, you know, Krishna, although he's the source of everything, he expands other living entities that are fundamentally related to him, but they have the opportunity to connect to him. You know, we're alike enough with Krishna that we can have a relationship, and we're different enough from Krishna that we can have a relationship. We're not exactly him. We're part and parcel of him. And we're seeing here Krishna interacting with his beloved parts and parcels, his beloved some of his eternal associates. And so here he is actually just eating. And that goes into the next verse, this eating process. Eating is such a relatable thing for us. You know, we all have to eat. We live in these little bio machines that require biofuel. Krishna is not like that. He's composed of the spiritual energy. Even the material energy is just one of his insignificant, actually, emanations. So what is this eating? What does that mean? So verse 26. The Lord enjoyed in the company of Lord Baladeva and the other cowherd boys, and sometimes sat with them on the same stone slab. While sitting, they ate simple food like rice, dal, vegetables, bread, and curd, which they had brought from their homes and which they shared in friendly exchanges. So we can see that here. He's got a little food in his hand. Lord is never hungry, Srila Prabhupada writes, nor does he require any food to fill his empty stomach. He is complete in himself. Yet he always mercifully eats the foods offered by his devotees in sincere affection. So we learned about this in the Ishopanishad just a few weeks ago, that Om Purnamadav Purnamidam, the Supreme Whole, is perfectly equipped and perfectly complete, and everything also emanates from him as a complete unit. So he himself doesn't experience incompleteness. In fact, the only reason we do is because of, as Prabhupada puts it, all manner of incompleteness is due to incomplete understanding of the complete whole. It's because we're not actually connected to him. We feel like we're not full. We feel like I'm hungry, something's missing. I got to fill it with something. That's our lack of God consciousness, Krishna consciousness. So Krishna, being the totality of everything, he doesn't experience incompleteness. So Prabhupada is going out of his way to point out this eating is not like our eating, our material eating. This eating is simply an exchange of love. And Krishna talks about this in the 9th chapter, which Prabhupada refers to. In 926, Krishna says, if you offer me with devotion a leaf, a flower, a fruit, or water, I'll accept it. So although he's complete, he doesn't need anything. If there's devotion, he will deign to accept it. Like he will actually, it's like for him, it's actually an act of mercy. He doesn't have to receive that, but he chooses to. He chooses to, for the sake of relationship, facilitates an exchange. This is one of the many ways in which we can serve Krishna. We can serve him food. So what we saw with Krishna's pastimes on the planet, here with Balaram, his brother, and the boys and the cows, is, their mothers had packed them, also pure devotees, had packed them lunch, and they would sit, and the Bhagavatam describes, they would sit, and the boys would surround Krishna like the petals of a lotus around the whorl of the lotus, around the middle, and he would face them, and through his mystic potency, he would appear to be facing all of them at the same time. So no one felt like his back was to them. They all felt they were facing him. And they would have this lunch together, like a little picnic. And everyone is eating something, and it's so informal and so sweet. Someone would taste something, and, oh, this is so good. You should try this, Krishna. After putting it in their own mouth, it's like there's no formality anymore. It's all just very sweet, very loving exchange. And Krishna would taste from this and taste from that and share this and share that. And everyone is serving one another. This is very sweet, loving reciprocity. And that's how Krishna operated. That's what the exchanges are like. So there's this very beautiful snapshot we're having here. Prabhupada says, the cowherd boys brought simple foodstuffs from home, and the Lord, who is constantly served by hundreds and thousands of goddesses of fortune, is always glad to accept such simple foodstuffs from his devotee friends. All the relatives of the Lord are his devotees only, and they're situated in different transcendental mellows as friends, parents, and lovers. So it's like the joy that we experience on the material platform from exchanging rasa, what's called rasa, the exchange of affection with our friends, or with parents, or if we're parents, children, or with our romantic partners. These are material reflections of the relationships that Krishna is eternally having with his devotees in different spiritual forms of these kinds of relationships. Like, this is the spiritual source of why it's fun for friends to get together and eat, what Krishna is doing with the cowherd boys here. Verse 27. After good rains, the grazing ground for the animals was full of green pasture, and both the bulls and the cows sat down on the grass fully satisfied. The cows, followed by their calves, appeared tired of grazing because of full milk bags. Calmly and quietly, the cows and calves rested and ruminated, chewing their cud. You see here, happy cow. Nothing quite like a happy cow. In fact, and Prabhupada talks about cows really throughout this purport. There's this phenomenon in material society called cow cuddling. Maybe you've heard of it. Cow cuddling. Cow cuddling is a thing that the devotees have known about forever. And it's a thing that the modern society is just not catching up on, like a lot of ancient wisdom. It turns out that when you're around a happy cow, you feel happy. Even more than any other animal. Like, it's nice to be around a happy animal because it's like you can feel that. They can feel your happiness, you can feel theirs. They're sentient beings, they actually have feelings. That's great. The cow, there's a special quality actually. And the Shastra describes that just by seeing a cow who's healthy and happy, one is put into the mode of goodness. the highest material mode. It's not exactly a spiritual experience, but it's a very refined material experience. There's a very peaceful, very joyful effect upon seeing a happy, protected, well-fed, rested, satisfied cow. And cow cuddling means you go out and you spend some time with the cows and you look at them and you pet them and you lie down next to them and you feel them and you smell them and you just spend some quality time with the cows. And it turns out it puts you in the mode of goodness. People come back all smiles.
Mhm.
There's a lot of this going on. There's cow cuddling. It's like a nice little thing you could do. There's some devotees I know in a farm community like half an hour outside of Ypsilanti, Michigan. They have a farm. They have like 4 or 5 cows, and they have one mother cow called her Yashoda, and she's a sweetheart. And you milked her. Yeah, I milked her too. She's a wonderful. She's been giving milk for years. Actually, she hasn't had a calf in like 3 years, maybe more, but she keeps giving milk. This is another thing: is that cows, they just give because of love. So she feels so loved and cared for that her motherly instincts are there. They're overflowing. She keeps giving milk, and I've had that milk. It's really good. And she knows she's loved and taken care of for life. And so they have actually ecotourism. They have cow cuddling. They have people come in and pet Yashoda and hug her and hang out with her. And there's a couple bulls and another cow, and it's like everyone comes in and they just love it, right? So
Even with devotees get it, but
Yeah.
even non-devotees
oh yeah,
get that. Like
these are
Shannon
non-devotees
from
coming
our-
in. They're coming
yeah,
in paying good money. We want to spend time with your cow.
Right.
Yeah.
And that Shannon from our Sangha, she's not on tonight, but she went with her niece and her sister-in-law somewhere in New Hampshire.
Mm.
Which I don't think their devotees even running it. They just have an Airbnb or something and cow cuddling.
Mhm.
It's like, it's a real thing, even people that like don't get it on this level, right? It's like,
It's tangible. You can feel it. So Prabhupada talks about it. Protection and grazing ground for the cows are among the essential needs for society and the welfare of people in general. The animal fat required for the human body can be well derived from cow's milk. Rather than eating flesh, you can eat the milk, which is freely given when they're taken care of. The dharma is that the milk goes to the calf first, or calves, and if there's any extra, then you can take. And as we see with Yashoda and many other cows that I know, when they're taken care of, they're protected, they feel loved, they just often will keep giving indiscriminately. So it's been years and years, and they just keep giving like how much milk did she give? Like a half gallon or something? A
Yeah.
gallon?
yeah, we got to take it home and
We made paneer with it.
paneer or yogurt or something. I can't remember.
It's every day. She just turns like grass into milk. I mean, that's magic. And milk is an extremely nutritious food. It's designed to turn a calf into a full-grown cow. So it's very fattening, very rich. And as long as you don't overdo it, and as long as you take care of the cow, you have access to an extremely rich source of fat. There's some vitamins in there too. And Prabhupada talks about that cow's milk is very important for human energy. And the economic development of society depends on sufficient food grains, sufficient milk, and sufficient transportation and distribution of these products. Lord Sri Krishna, by his personal example, taught us the importance of cow protection, which is meant not only for the Indian climate, but for all human beings all over the universe. So in this way, we're seeing some of the practical examples of what it means to do, as Prabhupada calls, simple living, high thinking. We have this high philosophy in Krishna consciousness, and we have also very simple, practical mode of goodness lifestyle, which in large part has to do with living off the land and protecting cows and being very satisfied with the experience that comes from having produce and protected cows and receiving that from Krishna's nature and living off of that joyfully. It's actually quite practical. Anybody can, especially, you can have like a little backyard garden. You can grow some flowers. You can grow, Tracy was showing us cucumbers. Cucumbers grow like weeds. You get some cucumbers, you will have more cucumbers than your friends will know what to do with. Like cucumbers grow so easily. If you take care of the earth, you can grow some other things. Zucchini is not too hard to grow. You get enough sun, tomatoes, etc. And you get a little bit more land, you can have a cow. You take care of the cow, and you'll be in the mode of goodness. You'll be happy. Maybe the cow will give milk, maybe not. And whether it does or doesn't, it's not viewed as like an economic venture, like, oh yeah, they better produce milk because I'm investing in them for that. It's like, this is like people have pets, you just take care of them and you love them. And sometimes the cow may be in a position to reciprocate that love with milk, and sometimes they'll just lick you and look at you and cuddle you. And that's very, very nourishing.
You gotta get a cow at Swanson Inn.
Yeah. A lot of work. A lot of work,
Sure.
but it's well worth it.
There's a cow rescue right by my house at home. I should have a cow.
Okay. Verse 28. The fully beautiful scenery after the rainy season was attractive to the eyes of everyone, including Sri Krishna, the cause of all causes. Here's a nice 2-page picture.
Oh, yeah. Who's hiding behind the tree? Is it Radharani?
It's a gopi. Beautiful scenery was attractive to everyone, including Sri Krishna. So Prabhupada talks about, in this purport, natural beauty, right? How the world is naturally full of beauty. We should always appreciate, he says, the creative energy of the Supreme Lord. Beautiful nature, even though material and therefore temporary, is always full of the glories of the Creator. There is a class of philosophers who condemn the material creation as false. They say that Brahman is truth, but the creation is false. This is not good. The temporary creation is also a relative truth. It is in fact the temporary picture of the eternal creation. The forgetful soul has no information of the spiritual creation, known as the Sanatana Dhamma, but the temporary creation gives an idea of this original creation. The devotees of the Lord therefore make the best use of the bad bargain by utilizing the temporary creation in the service of the Lord. So Prabhupada is talking here about, as the verse is talking about, beauty, attractiveness. It's not a problem that there's beauty, that there's desirable things. It's a problem that we want to have them for ourselves. It's a problem that we have a material orientation toward those things. The world has to be full of beauty. Even in the midst of any ugliness, there has to be some beauty. Why? Because it comes from Krishna. Krishna is extremely beautiful. He's the source of all attractiveness. The word Krishna itself, the very word, means all attractive. Krish, the Sanskrit word Krish is found in the word akarshati, to drag one towards, to pull one. Krishna is the puller. He attracts us to him. He's all attractive, right? So by virtue of that, there has to be some beauty. We shouldn't be surprised by that. And we should be, as Prabhupada says, appreciative of it, grateful and appreciative. And the only problem is if we have a messed up relationship with that. We want to have it for ourselves. We want to own it, want to control it. I want to be beautiful. I want to own and control that beautiful person or thing. These are material ways of thinking. They're problematic, but the presence of attractiveness is just an indication, as Prabhupada says. The temporary creation gives an idea of this original spiritual creation, right? There is some beauty to be found in the temporary world, so we can, as an indication, it should indicate to us that how much beauty there is in Krishna and the spiritual reality, right? And so Prabhupada is taking care here to point out that our philosophy is not one of rejecting the world and therefore, rejecting its energies, including beauty, attractiveness. We're not doing that. That's not what we're doing here. We're trying to, at first through practice and then naturally connect all these energies, including beauty, to Krishna. So when we see something attractive, we can practice being like, wow, really, you kind of did yourself on this one, Krishna. Well done. That's really something. And it's also an insignificant fraction of his own personal beauty. It's just a reflection of what spiritual reality is like. We can do that, and we should do that deliberately until it becomes natural, because that's reality. That's actually seeing through the eyes of Scripture. And as one practices and the heart becomes purified, one can naturally feel this truth more and more. Right? There's a reason why the great saints of the world found great beauty in the world, because they're connected to the divine. They're able to see how the beauty of this world, although transient and although they had no personal attachment for it, is coming from that source. They were able to see its divine roots, right? Whereas on the other end of the spectrum, the more attached you are to material energy, the more attached you are to having and controlling it, the less you are able to actually appreciate it. The less of a spiritual experience you're having, the more you're actually a slave, an addict, and the less your behavior and conduct is really saintly at all, right? So it's this God consciousness, it's this connection. Yoga means connection. It's this yogic practice, this connecting process that qualifies us to really appreciate beauty and to live in the midst of it and to see it as inspiration for God consciousness instead of just distraction from it, right? The materialist is constantly distracted. They see something they want to enjoy. It's like an itch. They have to scratch it. They have to have it, They can't help themselves. That's not fun. Not being able to help yourselves, needing to own something is not actually pleasure. It's slavery. The devotee can just without any personal motivation, be like, wow, how amazing is Krishna? Look at that. Listen to that. That's actually freedom. That's actually bordering on a spiritual experience. You can be free from these modes and just appreciate. And if you can connect it to Krishna, it is a spiritual experience. So Prabhupada is indicating for us that we're meant to do this practice of connecting. Everything accepted in full God consciousness has its spiritual value. And by the grace of the Almighty, its material effects are diminished in terms of the increasing degree of spiritual consciousness. That is the process for cultivating the human spirit. Try to increase our degree of spiritual consciousness and spiritualize, as Prabhupada is fond of using the word, spiritualize the objects of the senses, whether they're food and we offer that to Krishna, or we just made some garlands, found some nice flowers, made some garlands for Lord Chaitanya. That's spiritualizing those flowers. Before that, they could have been just, the property of somebody who wanted to have flowers for themselves. But you take that material energy and you connect it to Krishna, it becomes spiritual energy. So that's 4 verses so far. Let's pause here and take any reflections on anything that stood out, or comments, or questions. What did you hear so far?
The materialist is consciously or is constantly distracted, and the devotee is constantly conscious or present to connecting everything to Krishna, or present to the beauty in everything because they can connect it to Krishna.
That's right. It's that capacity to connect it to the divine, to connect it to Krishna, that Krishna consciousness, that allows it to be, instead of distracting, it makes it attracting towards Krishna. It becomes actually elevating. Now it becomes an uplifting experience instead of a degrading one. It's actually a degrading experience. It's actually kind of, if you think about it, what it's like to be a slave to your senses, it's degrading for the soul. For this part and parcel of spiritual consciousness, this eternal soul, to fall in lust with some object of the senses and to need it falsely is actually degrading. It's actually a fall from grace. It's not to shame anybody or myself, because I also have material desires, but it is a function of the material energy. It's a function of temporary reality. It's not really spiritual to need matter, right? And on the other hand, to be uplifted by the presence of greatness, whether it's someone else's ability or it's beauty or it's some intelligence you see, some wonderful capacity, and others some strength, to be uplifted in that, that indicates freedom from the modes. It indicates you're moving in the right direction, you're moving towards Krishna. You're seeing it as part of his potency rather than some thing you wish you had for yourself. Yeah. Any more comments of anything that stuck out, reflections or questions?
That this eating is an exchange of love while we sit and share in loving exchange.
Yeah. That was Prabhupada in verse 26 or so, talking about the spiritual experience, spiritual nature of the exchange between Krishna and his devotees in Vrindavan. Bless you, as it is with Krishna exchanging with any of his devotees, it's the devotion he's receiving. It's a spiritual exchange. Just like we've been talking about what it's like for somebody free from the modes of nature to appreciate without need, without addiction, without hankering, right? That'll give us a sense of what it's like for us to relate to Krishna and how he relates to us. It's completely free. You know, loving somebody is actually an experience that's only possible with complete freedom. If you need them, you can't really love them completely, because what you're really loving is you're loving what they can give you. But if you don't need them, you just love them as a free offering, that's actually love. That's how Krishna is with us. He doesn't need any of us. He loves us because that's his nature. He chooses to love, right? And we can also deliberately choose him. And so there's this free exchange of giving and receiving where nobody's owed anything. Nobody's keeping track. It's not a mercantile exchange. It's not tit for tat. It's not what have you done for me lately? You know, it's just loving because that's what's best and what we feel like we want to do. And that's what the eating that Krishna is having with his devotees is. It's just another exchange. Just the medium happens to be some, you know, apparently edible thing. That's all. Any other reflections before we move on? Okay. Verse 29. Thus the rainy season came to an end. The autumn began, and there were no more clouds in the sky. All the reservoirs of water became crystal clear, and the wind was no longer forceful. Lord Krishna, along with his elder brother, Lord Baladeva, lived at Vrindavana in this auspicious season. So now we've heard about like the muddy reservoirs. We've heard about like the choked out paths with weeds, and all that's gone now. Everything has become clean, cleansed. And Prabhupada is talking about, he says, when the sky is clear of all clouds, there is no longer any distinction between the portion of the sky that was covered and that which was never covered. Similarly, when the living entity now covered by the modes of material nature is freed from ignorance, passion, and so-called goodness, he becomes one with the absolute truth. Such oneness is called mukti, or freedom from the miseries of material life. So this autumn season is compared to mukti, to liberation. You had all this mud, you had all this stuff that happened during the, you know, the rains, and now autumn has come and cleared all that out. And you don't have any more rain, you don't have any more muck. The pools are actually clean. They're transparent, you can see into them. The paths are free from weeds. And so the soul is like this, that we actually have a divine nature. And all the stuff that's problematic for us is just stuff we picked up on the way, products of the modes of nature. When that's cleansed, we're not nothing. We don't cease to exist. We're not just one with the Lord, ceasing to have an individual identity. No, we're pure units of consciousness relating to that supreme. And yes,
Our deities in Philadelphia are Radha Shara Bihari. So it's Krishna Radha of the autumn.
yeah,
So that actually makes some, now I kind of understand why that's a special name for them because of what you just described with the autumn. So that's
it's a very
cool.
beautiful season in Vrindavan. And it's also when Kartik happens, holy month. Autumn season is also notable for special dance that Radha, Krishna, and the gopis have together. The Rasa dance happens during autumn. One of them, there's another one in spring. And there's great beauty then. Yeah. And so this beautiful season, this cleansing effect of nature is compared to what happens for the soul through the purifying practice of bhakti. They come to their real nature. And so Prabhupada says, just like, you know, you can have a cloudy sky and part of it is cloudy and part of it is clear. But when the clouds are cleared away, you don't say like, yeah, that part of the sky is the part that used to be cloudy. And this part is this part that was never cloudy. It's like, it's clear, it's clear. Whether you're always liberated or you're conditioned and you become liberated, once you're liberated, you're free. So you're not a second-class citizen, no, because you were conditioned once. No, if you're free, you're free. So there's no shame in us being contaminated, being conditioned, because we're taking to the process. You know, if you're in the bath and you see gunk is coming off you in the bath or in the shower, you don't get out. You just stay in there. You're doing everything you can. You know, there's no Nothing else better you can be doing. Just stay in the cleansing process. And this end result is very beautiful. And you're as good as if you were already eternally liberated once you are liberated. It's this purifying experience and liberating experience. Mukti means liberation. Of course, as Prabhupada points out, impersonalists prefer to merge into the existence of the transcendence. But the personalists, the devotees, do not annihilate their individuality. And thus the devotees of the Lord individually enjoy spiritual variegatedness with him. It is for the conditioned living entities that the material nature is created, and the conditioned souls are put into it to become pure, unconditioned souls. Those who become unconditioned by devotional service enter into the eternal kingdom of God. And those who lose the chance rot in dormant material conditions, sometimes manifested, sometimes unmanifested. Lord Sri Krishna descends to reclaim the conditioned souls. Okay. If anything stands out, please feel free to comment as we go. Verse 30. In autumn, all the reservoirs of water become enriched with growing lotuses. The muddy water again becomes normally clear and decorated, just as fallen, conditioned souls once more become spiritually enriched in devotional service. Picture. So just like that, those reservoirs in the autumn become full of lotus flowers, very beautiful. Similarly, Prabhupada says, the fallen conditioned souls once again become spiritually enriched in devotional service. The verse actually says. So Prabhupada writes, we should not be disappointed in our muddy life of material existence, right? You feel like you're in the muck. That's material existence. But don't be disappointed, he says, for as soon as we voluntarily take to the devotional service of the Lord, our whole life becomes clear like water in autumn. Devoid of our relationship with God, our life is barren. But as soon as the muddy mind is cleared by spiritual association or cultivation of the human spirit, the threefold miseries of material life are at once cleared off. Thus, the lotus of knowledge gradually fructifies, and this whole process of development ushers in transcendental bliss. So there's a way in which part of what we get from this process is the relief from the suffering of the material world. Lord Chaitanya talks about this in the Shikshastakam, first verse, first item of the first verse. Cheto dharpana marjanam. The heart is like a mirror that's been covered up and fogged and dirty. But this chanting, it cleanses the mirror of the heart, cleanses it. So just like a mirror, if it's dirty, if it's foggy, if it's warped, if it's covered, you can't see yourself, you can't see anything in it. Similarly, but if you clean it, you can, and you will, and you do see yourself. We actually can realize our own nature, and we can see reality more clearly because this chanting process cleanses our heart. The coverings that are there start to become removed. So this is what's talked about in these kinds of verses about cleansing the heart. There's so much unnecessary things that are the source of suffering, and they're foreign to us. And, you know, there's a large industry built around helping people to relieve themselves of these burdens. It's called self-help. And the ultimate kind of self-help is to not try to help yourself by doing all the heavy lifting, but to call in Krishna and ask for his help. Bhakti is the supreme form of self-help in that way. Because it's asking help from the highest self, the supreme self, the source of all selves, Krishna. That's supreme self-help. Otherwise, it's very difficult work. And it's not that we avoid that work in our lives, that bhakti yogis don't do any work on themselves. No, we do, definitely. Krishna indicates what we should work on, and we work on it. But our fundamental process is relying on him. Our fundamental process is asking for his mercy. And even our motivation for doing so is ultimately so that we can serve him purely and cleanly. We're not just like, I got dirty, clean me up so I can go out and get dirty again. That's like, you know, going to confessional and like, okay, I'm cleansed of sins. Go do whatever I want the next day. That's a impure attitude to purification. It's like purification isn't just so I can jump in the muck. Prabhupada, Bhagavatam talks about this. It's like compared to an elephant. Elephants, they jump into water and they splash water on themselves, get all that dust off, and as soon as they get off, they just splash the dirt back on themselves. Of course, there's biological reason for that. It's very cooling. Mud is very cooling for elephants in hot Africa or Asia. But if a human being does like that, it's like treating religion or spirituality as a way to just, oh, okay, I'll just do whatever I want, get nice and filthy, and then I'll clean up because they got to forgive me because I taken to the process, I repent, then I can do whatever I want again. It's like, no, that's not why we're doing self-help. We're doing self-help because that's how we'll be happiest, and that's how we can actually purely engage in Krishna service. That's why bhakti yoga is the best kind of self-help, because we're coming to him and we're like, Krishna, I want to serve you, but I'm so limited. Because of my mistakes, I've become like this stunted little plant. I can only grow so far. I have so many limitations because of my own poor choices. Please help me so I can serve you better. And Krishna sees that. He supports us. So this verse is about spiritual self-help, spiritual purification. Any comments or questions on that? Okay. Verse 31. The four prominent features of autumn are that there is no water in the sky, the weeds that grew here and there in the rainy season all wither away, the muddy roads and fields dry up, and the ponds of water become crystal clear. These four features of the autumn atmosphere are compared to the four orders of life. So in the Varnashrama system, there are four orders of life, four ashramas. First one is a student. They're young, they receive material and spiritual knowledge, and they get trained up how to control the senses, how to control the mind, understand spiritual philosophy. They learn how to communicate with others, cleanliness, learn respect for authority, and in this way, they develop a spiritual practice and become trained up in these things. Then you enter the world, you become more engaged in the world, you choose a partner, you're connected to that partner, you get married, you may have children, and you're working, you're developing. There's like, the making money, taking care of the house thing, you're getting in funds, you're spending funds, you're in the world. There's a lot of this engagement, but all that is founded on the spiritual lessons you received earlier. And then you start to divest. Instead of investing, you're divesting your interest in the material world. You're becoming more simplified. If you had children, they're like now able to take care of themselves. You are living more simply. There's less like living for pleasure and more living for deeper joy. And one begins to enter into the vanaprastha stage, and then one enters into sannyas, complete dedication. And so this is a traditional model, a traditional system. Now, in this age, this model is ideal, but generally people don't have access to these kinds of experiences growing up. And so the essence of them is bhakti yoga. We could practice bhakti yoga at any time, no matter how old we are or where we are in our lives. But in this varnashram system, the system of the four ashramas, this verse is showing us that there's actually parallels in lessons in nature, pointing towards these four ashramas, these four orders, right? Yeah.
So like, can you explain how no water in the sky is that saying that's correlated to student life from
Yeah, Prabhupada talks about in the purport. So as the white clouds is like clouds that are free from rain. Like you get those rain clouds are gray and black, right? White clouds are they're not going to rain on you. They're just puffy.
Yeah.
As the white clouds no longer bear the burden of water in the autumn sky, the student finds that the troubles of drawing water for the master become a burdenless job. They're not burdensome anymore. if the student, by the grace of his master, attains the spiritual knowledge. So typically in student life, you do menial service, and this purifies the heart. The student will, among other things, fetch water for the master, and that can feel like a burden. Menial labor can feel like a burden, but just like the sky becomes cleansed in autumn, our relationship with duty becomes cleansed. We no longer see it as a burden. When we start to perform it in devotion, when devotion is there, when it's not just doing stuff for the sake of doing it, when the heart is purified, we're doing things in service, then the duty, the labor becomes a labor of love. You know, devotees do so much in devotional service, but just try to stop them. I try to tell them, like, take it easy, don't do so much for Krishna. Like, why? I get so much joy out of it. You know, like, this is a fundamentally, a categorically different kind of experience than the like nose to the grindstone workaday world, because that's just to survive. It's really hard. It's not fun at all. Sometimes it's okay, but it's a lot of suffering. But doing it for Krishna is like what it's like for like I was a monk, you know, did a lot of menial labor. We chopped a lot of vegetables before Sunday feast, feeding 200 people, you know, a giant feast means a lot of cauliflower to cut up for pakoras. But if you do it in Krishna consciousness, you just know where that's going. It's going to feed Krishna, and then it's going to be distributed to all these innocent souls coming in, and it just becomes fun, you know. So there's a way in which taking to spiritual practice purifies us, and the technicalities of that are given in this verse. So the student and the householder. Prabhupada says, householders who beget children without restriction, like weeds in the rainy season, become solitary as soon as they attain to the stage of devotional service. People should learn to check sex life by voluntary restraint. So there's a way in which, as the heart becomes purified, we naturally lose interest in gratifying the senses, including in sex for its own sake, because we're getting so much from our spiritual practice. That's purification of the heart. So that's like Prabhupada is pointing out, that's much higher than artificially restraining the senses, or you know, just like being forced to not engage with the sense objects. Is like when you become attracted to higher things, you automatically let go of lower things. So similarly, householder life is that time in our lives where we are engaged with the objects of the senses the most. And it's that time in our life where we're meant to spiritualize all those relationships. And so if we don't do that, if we just engage indiscriminately without the spiritualizing process, the bhakti yoga process, the linking process, then it's degrading and becomes like problematic. All those things become like, you know, not so helpful for us. You need to have some gratification of the senses, but you're not actually making progress. Whereas for devotees who are spiritualizing, they're eating, sleeping, mating, other things that they're doing, then those very activities become supportive for deepening their bhakti, deepening their appreciation for Krishna, becoming freed from attachment to those things and more attached to Krishna. Does that make sense? So these are like elaborate analogies whereby the Bhagavatam and Prabhupada are pointing out, like, nature is showing these different ways of like growing and purifying, and that's actually what happens in human life too, in these 4 different stages of life: student, engaged householder, kind of more kind of senior, older person, and then a fully dedicated soul.
Retirement,
Yeah,
renunciation.
that's right. Retirement and renunciation. Prabhupada concludes as purport, therefore, in all spiritual orders and all 4 grades of social life, devotional service to the Lord is essential. Without this relationship, all the regulative principles of Varna means your occupation, like, you know, whether you're a Shudra, which means you're interested in arts and crafts and skills, or you're a Vaishya, which means you're interested in like commerce, industry. Kshatriyas are management and people. Brahmanas are knowledge based. All the regular principles of Varna and Ashrama. Ashrama are those 4 orders of life: student, householder, retired, renounced. They become burdensome duties without the relationship to Krishna, as they have in this age of Kali. That's how you get a caste system. When the regulative principles have no aim, the varnas become a caste system, and the ashram has become the business of various shopkeepers. So if you take a social system and you divorce it from spirituality, it becomes just another power struggle. It becomes just another caste system, another way for the upper class, the ruling class, the haves to keep the have-nots out of power. Because without Krishna consciousness, we just become victims of our own material desires, and either we have access to, we're in the haves, in which case we want to keep that, or we're in the have-nots, in which case we want a revolution. Just like we can be the haves and start it all over again. And in any case, it's just another caste system, just another class system. Whereas a social structure that keeps Krishna, that keeps God in the middle, is actually uplifting and helpful. Then you can know what your duty is at this time of life, what you're good at, what you're meant to do, and you can engage it in an uplifting way without undue attachment, and also without confusion. People don't even know what they're good at these days, practically. They're so confused. All these anomalies of the present social system can be reformed only by cultivation of the human spirit in the devotional service of the Lord. (32) Beautiful white clouds, freed from all burdens of water distribution, float in midair like mendicants freed from all family responsibilities. Here we have a picture of a very satisfied sannyasi with his begging bowl, his stick, just wandering around. Just like the clouds, they're free. They're free from all burdens. Prabhupada writes, about the purpose of these four orders, It says in student life, one is taught the primary principles of the human form of life. One who enters the householder's life can execute the duties of a family man because they have already been trained for this job in their brahmachari ashram. Then you retire, then you prepare for the life of sannyas. And then Prabhupada talks about how in this age, all these four distinct times of our life, distinct periods, they're no longer existing in pure form, right? Because students aren't really, there's not really respect for authority there. Authority is not really worth respecting in many ways. Those who are in the grahastha stage are just attached to enjoying through the senses as much as possible. They're not really using their wealth to support others. Those who they would give donations to, or should give donations to, the vanaprasthas and sannyasis, the more spiritually renounced, are no longer actually qualified to receive it. Where the renounced, the mendicants are just beggars, just living off the leavings of others, like parasites, without giving anything back. So the whole system has become, as Prabhupada puts it, topsy-turvy. But that does not mean that there's no reality in them. One should not conclude that there is no good money simply because one is met with counterfeit coins. The sannyas ashram, the renounced ashram, is meant for complete freedom from all anxieties and is meant for uplifting the fallen souls who are merged in materialism. But unless the sannyasi is freed from all cares and anxieties like a white cloud, it is difficult for them to do anything good for society. There's a way in which, as one becomes more spiritually advanced, one has the capacity to, and then the responsibility to help others. It's compared to, in scripture, being a bucket. If you're a bucket, you don't give anything back to others. You're like a bucket with a hole. You can't hold anything for yourself. Eventually, you'll be denied all the gifts that you've accumulated. If you try to keep it for yourself selfishly, you have to give back. So human life, spiritual life, is meant for actually progress for ourselves and then giving back. Just like in a functional society, our elders are actually incredible sources of wisdom. They're really valuable. Like you can imagine, if you had the access to somebody who's lived all this basic kinds of experiences you're going through now, like 15 times, 20 times each themselves, they could tell you what they learned from it. How much trouble you would save by actually respecting them and hearing. That's what elders are for. And they get a great deal out of offering that. So spiritually speaking, the sannyasi is one who has actually become perfect in connecting the world and everything in it to Krishna. They're more devotionally advanced. And their only business is going on helping others, connecting them. They're freed. They no longer have any material obligation because they've tamed their material senses. They've actually become freed from the material hankerings by advancement in devotional service. So they go and they find people who are less advanced than them, and they just give. So Prabhupada is doing. That's what any devotee in the advanced stage is doing. So it's just like they're not impelled anymore. They're not there. They don't have a chip in the game. They're not trying to make money. They're not trying to make ends meet. They're not trying to do it for prestige. They're just literally trying to help people because they have no other business here. That's what sannyasis get to do. That's what a fully renounced person gets to do. Sannyas ultimately means, literally the word sannyas means perfectly positioned, everything in its perfect place. It doesn't just mean that you're an old monk with a beard. It means you know how to connect everything and put it in its place and deal with it properly, fully Krishna conscious. And when we have the association of such persons, then we can receive, just like from an elder, we can receive wisdom. Because they have no other business. They just get the opportunity to just share and give. It's a very sweet life. Four more verses. Any comments, questions, or reflections so far before we conclude? Okay, 33. There are waterfalls flowing from the hills of the forest, but sometimes water does not flow from them. So the waterfalls are not like ordinary rainfall. They are compared to great reformers who speak or do not speak as the time requires. The Acharya Prabhupada writes, spiritual teacher is that person who knows the scriptures well and teaches their disciples in terms of the disciples' capacity to understand and advance in spiritual realization. Therefore, he sometimes speaks and sometimes does not speak. Right? In material life, when you make a teacher an employee, you actually ruin the education process, because now they can be bought or sold, because you force them to teach. You force them if you want to get your money, you want to get your income, you have to teach this thing. That means the truth is no longer at the top. They're no longer the servant of the truth, they're the servant of their paycheck. That is not a teacher. A teacher must be dedicated to the truth. They should be given whatever they need, and they should have a relationship to the truth where they're not able to be purchased and not able to be sold. They cannot be pushed around. Therefore, they make no compromise for the truth. So in this way, spiritual teachers, they function in a pure way because you cannot force them to reveal their secrets. If they judge that you are not receptive, you are not actually in this for sincere reasons, they're not obligated to open their mouths and share. Whereas a material teacher, if you pay them money, they have to teach you. That is not the case here. Spiritual teacher can give anything away for free and can zip it up as soon as they see this and there's no sincerity here. I'm not obliged to share, right? Like a waterfall can start and it can stop. It's not like rain that just keeps going. So the spiritual teacher actually is dedicated to truth, and wherever there is an opportunity to share that truth and have it be received, they'll give it. And wherever there isn't, they'll hold back. And they'll also adjust, not the essential truth. They won't modify the truth, but they'll adjust the message so it can be received. Like Prabhupada, like this book is giving us this message, these messages of eternal truth, but packaged in such a unique way. Here's some things that nature tells us. Why don't you learn from nature? Apparently, it's just a book about nature. Prabhupada's going to this little seminar in Japan. He's saying, here's some knowledge from nature. Looks like it's a very sweet, very simple, naturalistic exposition. No, it's actually extremely deep. It's actually about spirituality, but Prabhupada has expertly packaged it so that the pill can be swallowed. That is the prerogative of the teacher, to find the ways and means to present things according to realization, so it's not backwards, it's not upside down, it's not like actually incorrect, but it can be appreciated and assimilated by people in whatever situation they're in. According to their situation, they can still appreciate it and take it in and relate to it. Great teachers will do that. They can find the ways and means to attract people. Otherwise, you have the problem of either you're trying to share something exactly in the way that you heard it, but it becomes unrelatable to others. Or you modify it so much you actually lose the essence and it's no longer really potent anymore. You actually compromise. So the real teacher can keep the essence the same, but package it in a tasty little chewable vitamin so that the kids can eat it, you know? Bill Flintstone's chewable vitamin. And all your vitamins are there, but it tastes good, so that they'll eat it. That's the Acharya. 34. Small pools of water accumulate during the rainy season, and the autumn season they gradually dry up. The little creatures playing in those small pools do not understand that their days are now numbered and will end very soon. Thus they are like foolish people, foolish men who, not caring for the nearing day of their death, become absorbed in the so-called enjoyment of family life. If you see like little tiny pools that are drying out, things will live in them, but they don't know that they're not going to live in them for long. We can help from a higher perspective because we understand this is like shriveling up. And so from a higher perspective, somebody who is very attached, like the crane, we talked about the muddy crane stuck in their muddy banks of their river, they can become attached to their own context, their own little world, and think that's all in all, but it's very unfortunate. They become absorbed, and it's foolish and unfortunate, just like a bug living in a puddle doesn't understand that that puddle isn't all in all and is not really meant for forever. Here's a relatable little quote. Prabhupada says, the politician never retires from politics, even if he has enjoyed many covetable posts like those of minister or president. The older he is, the more he is attached to his false prestige. He is so foolish that he does not see that many other politicians who thought like him have come and gone with no gain or loss for want of them. Nobody misses them. They just go. These family men, big and small, are like the small fish in the pools of water that gradually dry up in the autumn. They are foolish because they think that their attachment to their family or any other material context, their health, their body, their wealth, their intelligence, what have you, their attachment to these things, even at the end of their lives, will be able to protect them from the cruel hands of death. Not to be. "35. When the small pools of water become too hot because of the scorching heat of the autumn sun, the poor small creatures with their many family members suffer terribly, as poor householders do with too many family members suffering economic strains, and yet they go on begetting children because of uncontrolled senses." So living beyond our means, right? When we become addicted to the activities of the senses, we live on credit, we live beyond our means. It may literally mean having too many kids. It may mean like living off of credit cards or living in a house that's too big for you. You have the housing bubble. You live like live for Christmas and all the toys and gadgets. And there's a way in which it's just a constant source of anxiety. Because of our attachment to these things, we need more and more of them. And so we live beyond our capacity, and that constant struggle for more just creates more trouble. This is like directly a condemnation of the materialistic society we live in, which tries to teach us that if you just have more, you'll be happy. So that's like burning up in a small pond, in a small puddle. Prabhupada writes, the attention of a human being therefore should be drawn to the cultivation of the human spirit, for this will gradually protect them from all sorts of discomfiture and elevate them to a higher status of life, for real and eternal enjoyment in personal contact with Krishna. Last verse for this week. With the progress of the autumn season, the moist earth and muddy places begin to dry up and the green vegetation begins to fade. This drying up and fading resembles the gradual disappearance of the false sense of affinity and ego. So the false identification starts to dry up. Just like when you start to practice bhakti, you lose your sense of identity with like your country and family and stuff. It's not that it disappears right away necessarily, but it becomes less relevant. Like, yeah, I was born in this country, yeah, I was raised in that country, yeah, but it's like not as important, whereas previously it was all important. These are artificial things that we become attached to temporarily, just like after the rainy season, these short-term weeds that can only thrive in the flooding rain, they dry up and die. So all these artificial attachments, they start to kind of like shrivel up and become insignificant. And there's a way in which what it means for us is that the practice of bhakti actually frees us from these false identities, male, female, or third gender or transgender. These are also false identities. Identity of the body, identity of our income bracket, identity of our language group or ethnicity, you name it, political association. These are all just temporary material identification. And Prabhupada writes, no one can adjust the sufferings of material existence, but by spiritual culture, one can elevate themselves from the effects of such material life. This freedom from the false sense of ego is called the liberation of the soul. Hare Krishna. Okay. Any final comments or questions or reflections? Anything that stood out?
I went to, yesterday I went to a wake for one of my old friends. Her husband passed away, and I met a friend there, and she said, and he was 39, he was really young, and so she said, it just makes me think about my life and makes me look at what I'm living in, like my partner and my house, and like, and she's like, and I'm thinking about like, what happens if my partner dies and I have to like stand up here and like receive all these people coming to give their like condolences. And it was just such an eye-opening opportunity to think about for like myself, like how when we zoom out, we can just see the bigger picture. We can understand the true meaning of life and of what is given for us on this path. And when somebody who doesn't have that at all, like my friend, she doesn't have a spiritual practice, a spiritual guide. She didn't grow up with it. And so she's just so consumed with her immediate ecosystem of her home,
Yeah.
her partner, that it was like, oh wow, like of course this is like the most rattling for you.
It's beyond jarring. I mean, it's actually devastating.
Yeah.
When one is attached to something temporary as the all in all, it's like,
Yeah.
even if you don't lose it right away, just the thought of losing it, I mean, there was a writer who wrote, I think there's a book, it's just like a materialistic psychologist. They wrote a book called, I think, Death and Fear of Dying. They wrote about how like Ernest Becker, like wrote that like so much of what constitutes human society is our attempt to avoid the anxiety of dealing with death, or the things that we do, including having kids, are just ways of trying to live on past death. And in material consciousness, therefore, it's actually like horrifying. And we do all these things to not think about the impending loss of the things around us and ultimately our own material body. But none of that really solves the problem. It's going to happen anyway. It just delays the inevitable of having to process it. And spiritual life doesn't just mean looking at these uncomfortable truths. It includes that, but it means putting them into the greater context, because that's where they exist. There is a reason for death. There's a reason for the stages of life coming and going. And there's a reason for, just like in this view of nature, when we see underneath the seasons and we see the spiritual purpose to it, it becomes actually just very peaceful and very natural, and actually become grateful for the opportunity to engage wherever we happen to be, even if it's a season of loss. That doesn't mean we don't grieve and don't feel something, some pain, but it's actually only devotees, people with devotional vision, who can really handle these things properly. Everyone else is just kind of running from it. It's really hard. It's foreign for the soul, actually. It's very foreign. Any other reflections, comments? Anything that stood out? Let's get something from our online crew. What did you hear?
I really heard what you talked about on verse 35 about, how we live in this world of great anxiety and of just wanting, because we get a little bit more and then we just want more and more and more from that. And it's like amazing how kind of like what Mel said, when you like zoom out and when you really, start to like focus in on your spiritual life more, like it just becomes more and more evident that there's like this like desire, this like burning desire that people have for all these things. And then with more things, they just want more and more and more. And it's like, it's kind of, I don't know, like shocking to watch.
Yeah, it's the effect of the modes of nature, particularly passion and ignorance. Yeah, we become implicated more and more in that cycle of hankering and getting, and then fearing losing, and then wanting more of it again. It's just a suffering. It's just a suffering thing. And our perspective as bhakti yogis is that the most expedient way to actually address that isn't just through knowledge, because a lot of people can see through that this isn't really working. But the most practical way to actually become free from that is through bhakti, because we're meant for connection. We're actually very active by nature. So if we just know that this isn't going to help me, but we don't have anything better to do, we'll do it anyway. We may hold off for some time, but generally people can't hold off and stay in a neutral position. If they do, they're actually just like living like an impersonal life. That's a suffering existence because they don't really engage. They're just kind of dissociative. But people generally just fall right back into it some way or another, higher or lower. They get into some game, some you know you know exchange to try to be engaged in that way, because we're meant for connection. We're meant for like relationship, and those are the material forms of that. So bhakti yoga means actually experiencing that spiritually, by which one naturally becomes renounced from the material thing and starts to see it for what it is, and actually has like an alternative, a positive alternative, right? It's not enough to see a problem. We actually have to be able to taste the solution. Bhakti yoga is that. It is that solution. If we start to taste that a little bit, then we actually have evidence for the solution in its complete form, because we're tasting it. We're beginning to have a taste of it. So then it's like, okay, yeah, I actually don't want that. That's such a wow. No, I'd rather just be, let's just invite devotees over and have kirtan. How about that? I really like that, or what have you. That's real life. Yeah. Any other reflections or questions before we end? Almost 8 o'clock.
There's no shame in being contaminated because we're in the cleansing process.
Yeah.
And that, when you say, bhakti is like the spiritual self-help.
Yeah.
And
Highest form of self-help.
and that Krishna can inform us of, or, use even someone else to inform us of where healing, what we're missing, what our healing lies, and then put in effort, and then also we'll realize it's ultimately in his hands. So balancing that effort and surrender.
Jai. So for this week, read verses 25 through 36, the third quarter.
37, right?
The 36, there's 48 verses, so the 36, and make a comment in WhatsApp about something that stood out to you from the class or from the readings. And we'll see you next week. I'll be in Toronto, but we'll have class from there on Zoom, and I'll see you on WhatsApp, and we'll finish the Light of the Bhagavat. Hari Bol. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Light of the Bhagavata, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai. Thanks, everyone.